they're reluctant to part with the money, right? They're reluctant to pay for that kind of expertise. But if that's holding back your business, if that's stopping you from scaling and growing faster, well, then it's a false economy, right? Then you're just holding back.
100%. If you want to grow a business, if you want to scale, if you want to achieve anything of greatness, then you cannot put a price on high quality staff who are going to take you on that journey, because there is no way to build anything great without having great people around you. Guys, Matt Haycox here, and welcome to another episode of the Matt Haycox Show, where I've got with me today Jennifer Geary. Now, Jennifer is a Chief Operating Officer, she's a Chief Risk Officer, she's a speaker, she's an author, she's a mentor, and I hear she's an all-around great, fun Irish girl too. So lots to look forward to and lots to learn. And I always said, I've been saying it more and more on these podcasts, that one of my favourite bits about having a podcast is being able to ask, very selfishly, the questions that I want to ask, to benefit me and benefit my businesses. And I guess luckily my audience get to listening in as well. But I've had some great guests lately where they've been very applicable to my own businesses, and obviously coming from a financially services type background and lending businesses, etc. I'm very much looking forward to talking to Jennifer today and getting deep on operating, on risk, and seeing what I can learn to benefit. So welcome to the show, Jenny.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you so much, Matt. And no, it's a pleasure to be here. I love listening to your podcast, and I know you've got such an interesting following of people, I think, entrepreneurs, founders, people in all walks of life, and lovely to have a chat, and I'm sure we'll both come away with something from it.
So, well, like you said, I've got a good mix of audience, from business owners to wannabe business owners to, young entrepreneurs, and to, I guess, to people who are in employment and maybe looking to make that break. So, we have a wide variety of guests, but I always tend to find that, whoever's doing the talking, there's always something to learn, wherever you are on the ladder or whatever stage of life or business you're at. Taking that and putting it into context, because I guess on the face of it, many people will probably think that they either don't know what a Chief Operating Officer is or a Chief Risk Officer is. They either don't know what they are, or maybe they don't need one. Just tell us in simple terms, what exactly are those two roles? Where do they sit in a business? And why might business owners of different shapes and sizes need one?
Yeah, there are two very grandiose terms, aren't they? So it's far more important and relevant, I think, to talk about what kind of functions they perform in an organization, and so that people can think about whether and when they need that kind of expertise. And just, by way of background before I jump in, I guess had a pretty conventional, career start in life. I trained as a chartered accountant in Dublin. I worked my way through financial services, working in big banks, worked for a spell in not-for-profit, and then got into fintech a little bit more. And I suppose increasingly, as I've gone through my career, I feel like I've increasingly worked in a more entrepreneurial capacity. So I came to that later in my career than maybe some of your listeners. But, more recently, I worked in a fintech that provided funding for startups, right, for micro enterprises. I worked in a software company that sells into financial services. And of course, my side hustle, my little venture is my books. And that's where I had to, own the whole thing from beginning to end, own the creative process, decide how it was going to look and feel and all that kind of thing. So, maybe from some quite conventional, foundings, I've branched into other areas. But in terms of the roles, so a COO, Chief Operating Officer, is typically, when you get to an organization of a certain size, is typically the number two, is typically the second in command. But quite different, if you're the founder, if you're the CEO, you have obviously been there since the beginning. You're there to try and create something new, to find a new angle, to break new ground, to devise a strategy, to create something of value that's not there already. And as COO, your role is to tuck in behind that sort of, founder, CEO, and do all of the things that are needed to make that a success, right? So that can be everything from operations to customer services, to finance, to marketing, to technology. And it varies. It very much varies. There's no set list of roles that a COO can cover. I counted 16, for what it's worth, 16 disciplines that a COO can do in an organization. But most importantly, for you as a founder, it's when you hit that point of, you're either starting to think, I'm out of my depth on some of this stuff, right? This is getting a bit complex and I just don't know it and I don't have the time to learn it. That's one thing. Or, a lack of expertise is maybe holding you back in a certain area. Or frankly, you're just doing stuff that's de-energizing you and taking you away from what you loved about the role in the first place, right? And you've got to a certain level of success and scale. That can be time then to bring in someone to cover some of those things that frankly are not your sweet spot, that you're not brilliant at, that you kind of have to do but you don't want to do, who can take that off you and run that for you so you can get back to what you do best. So I'll pause for breath there because that's a COO, and I can talk about Chief Risk Officer in a sec.
Well, yeah, just before we go on to the Chief Risk Officer, so with the COO, who reports into them? So, I mean, obviously, I guess depending on the size of the business, you've got your board, so you've got your finance director, you probably maybe have a marketing director, sales director. Are these roles that would still report into the founder, into the CEO, or would they report into the COO and kind of take out a layer of delegation there?
They can. It very much depends, and you can set that up in the way that you think best for the organization. So I have had the finance role. I have not had the finance role under me. And again, I guess qualifying as an accountant, I was able to cover that, but I haven't had it. I've had HR under me. I have not had HR under me. So it very much depends as a CEO and with your board, how you want to level that and how you want to cover off those pieces. There's no set rules, and it's as much about your expertise and the person's expertise as anything else.
And whilst there's no set rules, I get that. Are there some that you think would never fall under, like sales and business development? Would that always stay more directly linked to the CEO and the founder, and that you would deliver on that sales journey?
Typically, I would say yes, that's the case. So your salesperson, your chief revenue officer, whatever you call that role, would typically be outside of the realm of COO. That being said, I had a COO write to me after the first book to say, "You forgot R&D. I'm a COO and I've got R&D." And I was like, "Oh wow, I didn't know that. Okay, fine." So it can depend. But yeah, what I've seen most commonly is sort of sales and revenue is separate to operations. But some of the other things around that can probably vary as well. Marketing, PR sometimes sits outside. Product, you can argue both ways, but product development, if that's a role in your organization, can sit outside. It's typically, all of the things that make the organization work and, in the background and, support the functioning of the organization.
And when is the right time, or how big would a business need to be to actually think about taking one of these on? And I've been playing it with in my head while I've been listening to you, but I'm interested to hear what you've got to say first. I'll chuck a few of my thoughts in.
Well, sure. I mean, obviously you want to probably get the organization to a certain level of volume of success, but, before you start thinking about loading up with too many senior people. And as if you're a founder, entrepreneur, you're probably going to want to have to bootstrap, all of those things until you've proven the concept and until look, I've got something here now. I've got a business, I've got revenue, I'm showing something. And as I said, I think you often know when you're hitting that point of, I'm starting to get out of my depth, or I'm being de-energized, or I'm running out of bandwidth, or I'm covering everything, and I'm actually you can sort of feel you're starting to hold the organization back because all of the decisions are bottlenecking up through you, and it's too much and it's taking you away. So rather than put a kind of a number or a stage or a time period on it, I think it's much more a function of where the organization is relative to you, and when that organization is growing and taking on a life of its own, and you're starting to be that bottleneck, then that's usually a good indication that you need someone else around you.
I mean, when I first started, I guess, having this conversation with you or thinking about the concept, I was imagining that probably most people listening to this would think, it's a long way off for me, or you need to be quite a substantially sized business, before that COO role drops in. But I think for me, having heard more about it from you, I would see it coming in actually in an early stage in a business. Now, it depends. I guess it depends on what your strategy is as to how you're going to grow your staffing structure. And I know different people have different takes on this. And I always get asked the question of, if I'm starting a business, who's the first person that I should be hiring, or what is the order of who I take on? And my take on it, because I'm a massive advocate for the fact that any business owner, any CEO should know how to do as many of the jobs as possible as well as possible. And I talk about this a lot with regards to finance, for example. And I'm absolutely frightened and staggered at the same time by the amount of business owners, I would say almost the vast majority, that have no grasp of the finances of the business whatsoever. I mean, as someone lending money, I see it all the time firsthand where, we'll get an application for finance, we'll ask them a few questions saying, we've just looked at your accounts, can you come back and answer us these questions, please? And the response will always be, I can't tell you that, I've got an accountant who does that for me, or let me pass you over to my FD because they need to give you the answers. And it's absolutely frightening that and these aren't complicated questions, and it's frightening to me that they don't know the answers. I always say, look, you don't need to be an accountant, but you need to have enough knowledge so that you can find your way around a P&L, find your way around a balance sheet, and be able to have conversations with any of the divisions in your business so that you know you're not getting the wool pulled over your eyes. So whether that's sales or marketing or operations or finance or whatever it may be. My view to when someone's starting a business and growing a business and looking to scale from a staffing perspective is, I think as the founder, you should be doing as much of everything as possible until you then hit breaking point. And it's almost like, for me, hire number one, or person number two in the business, is almost an assistant to you and a jack of all trades. And that when you do decide that you want to be hiring someone in a division, like you need someone in sales or you need someone in marketing, again, I think it's worth putting the money and the effort in to find a manager rather than an executive on day one. I know a lot of people will argue, well, that's too expensive for me because I don't need someone managing. But if you don't have the caliber of managers, etc., below you, then ultimately you're going to find yourself doing too much management, too much nitty gritty. There's a long story, long explanation story that, but I guess where I'm leading to is that I guess for the right COO, it sounds very much like a right hand to a CEO, to a CEO really, the person that can help you in so many areas deliver on your vision.
Yeah, I think those are brilliant observations and clearly born, Matt, out of real world experience, right? There's no substitute for having your hands on it yourself. And when you're creating something for the first time, I agree with you. Like, you've got to understand the unit economics, right? You know, how much am I making on this? Did I lose on that transaction? You know, how many of these do I need to sell in order to turn a profit and break even? Like you've got to have that. And even if you feel a bit of a numbers phobe, like you've got to find a way that you understand intrinsically the economics of what it is that you're selling, whether it's a product or a service or something like that. And, you know, I think there's a learning, isn't there, and a humility to making a payroll, to tidying up your office at the end of the night, to, you know, doing all, you know, to putting out a blog post, even if you're not comfortable with it, you know, and all that kind of thing. So I agree with you. I think the more, and especially for people early in their careers, that do it, you know, learn, ask someone. There's lots of people out there willing to help and advise and show and do it, because you're right, you learn it. And you should never expect somebody to do something that you wouldn't be prepared to do yourself and that you don't have some degree of understanding, right? So I agree with everything you said about early stage and bootstrapping and that sort of thing. But then the second point to what you said, and I do see this with some founders sometimes, is they're reluctant to part with the money, right? You know, they're reluctant to pay for that kind of expertise. But if that's holding back your business, if that's stopping you from scaling and growing faster, or stopping you from clinching that sale, or you know getting that bigger customer and so on, well then it's a false economy, right? Then you're just holding back.
100%. You know, you need to decide what it is you want to achieve from the outset. Look, are you looking for a lifestyle business? And if you're looking for a lifestyle business, fine, I get it. You probably want to hire as few people as possible, keep as much to yourself, be tight, and keep the money. But if you want to grow a business, if you want to scale, if you want to achieve anything of greatness, then you cannot put a price on high quality staff who are going to take you on that journey, because you know there is no way to build anything great without having great people around you.
Yeah, and I would actually counter argue that if you want a lifestyle business and if you want some more time to yourself, then once you've achieved that level of scale, that's actually when you need a really, you know, competent operations manager, you know, finance manager, director, you know, someone who's going to manage that stuff for you as well. So
true. Yeah, true. Well, look, let's move from operating to risk. So we know what a chief operating officer is now. What is a chief risk officer?
So look, and not every organization will have a chief risk officer, right? I fully get that, and it's again a particular term that's in certain sectors. It's just, you know, known, you know, in finance, in med, in pharma, in airline, you know, in regulated industries. Yeah, you will have chief risk officers, but not all the case. But what I really wanted your listeners to understand is really what the function is, and even if you don't have a CRO, how you cover some of the things that a CRO would typically do. And that starts with an understanding of risk. And what I mean by risk is not some sort of nebulous concept out there, or, you know, some checklists or boxes that needed to be ticked. It is, what is the impact of uncertainty on your objectives, right? So whatever your business objectives are, right? I want to grow to this, I want to enter that market, I want to get to this size, I want whatever that is, what could happen to disrupt that vision? And risk is no more, no less than that. And of course, risk can be upside as well as downside. So risk can be seemingly unexpected things that knock you off course from where you want to be. But upside risk is saying, well, you know, what could happen to our advantage actually? What's out there that if we capitalize, if we do something now, will actually, give us a boost into the future. There was a lovely story about, a COO that sort of anticipated some issues with supply chain. It may have been before the whole sort of Evergrande issue and that sort of thing, but they anticipated, or maybe it was COVID or something, but they anticipated supply chain problems, and they convinced the organization to borrow and to stock in advance of the supply chain disruption. They got the stock at good price and they averted a problem. I mean, that's really clever forward anticipation and taking advantage and also avoiding pit stops along the way. So you may not need a chief risk officer in that title, but what you do need, both in terms of your own discipline or in having mentors and advisors, is people to say to you, okay, Matt, what is it you want to achieve with your business in the next year, 2 years, 5 years? And what could happen to help that, and what could happen to set that back? And let's talk about that, right? And let's talk about the kind of organization that you are setting up and what its goals are and what its ethos is and what its brand is and its values and so on. And let's start to set some guidelines as to what we're going to do within that space and when we're going to know that we're hitting up against the boundaries of that space, right? So that's a really good risk management conversation. Bad risk management conversations are, I'm the department of no, I tell you why you can't do things, I, put doubt in your mind, I hold you back, I de-energize you. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is intelligent, thoughtful conversations to ultimately get you to where you want to get to.
Well, I mean, you've kind of partially taken my question away from me, which was going to be to say that I'm sure many business owners who've either experienced risk officers or risk departments or ones who have actually employed them themselves would use that analogy, what you were just saying then about the department of no, and that they are the business prevention unit, and whatever expression you want to use. You used the word entrepreneurial earlier on in the conversation here, and I kind of made a note of it because I wanted to tie in with how does a chief risk officer operate from an entrepreneurial perspective, and I mean how do they strike that balance? And I guess as a business owner looking to employ someone in a CRO type position, how would you find the right person and how would you get the best out of them so that they can still do their job of managing risk, but they can walk the balance of the fact that if they took care of every risk, you would never grow the business?
Absolutely. You could talk yourself out of anything, right? And it's a matter of finding the right person for your organization. So it starts with, and as a founder, obviously you have this, a really clear understanding of the type of organization that you're trying to grow. And are you, and depending on the sector that you're in and the line of business that you're in, are you going to be bold and brave? Are you going to move fast and break things? Are you going to, Richard Branson's book, Screw It, Let's Do It? Is it that kind of an organization that just needs to go out and be experimental and propositional and actually is prepared to take some risk along the way to break new ground and to learn and to find things? Or maybe because of the sector that you work in or whatever, do you need to be that safe pair of hands, for example? And not every chief risk officer will be right for every situation, right? And again, that I think your implicit point was you've got to match the person to the situation. Everything, whatever area you're working in, obviously you start with law and you start with regulation and you start with all those, practices that need to be done. But then within that, it's finding the person that shares in your vision, understands what it is that you're trying to do and believes in that vision and is just as invested as you in the success of that venture. But then what they bring is a skill set to say, okay, I understand where we're looking to get to and I want to get there too, but let me help you, right? Let me help you anticipate problems. Let me tell you where the red lines are that we really can't go outside. And within that space, then let's move really fast. Let's move with integrity. One organization I worked talked about, you don't say we can't because, you say we can if, right? And that's a really important pivot. We can do this as long as we do that, and that, right? And that sort of thing. And you really, as a CRO, you really don't want to be in the situation. There have been times when I've been the sole voice in the room and all eyes were on me. And I've had to say, guys, we're not ready. We're not ready. We're not ready to launch. But you really don't want to get to that point, right? What you want is a more trusting, informed relationship whereby there aren't those kind of difficult moments or surprises where you're all invested and you're talking about what it's going to take to get your product or service to the next stage.
And for both of these roles, I mean, are they the kind of roles that could be part-time and outsourced to a degree, or are they very integral full-time parts of a business?
No, absolutely. You can have fractional COOs, you can have fractional CROs. You've got to be realistic, of course, about the amount of ground that can be covered in, say a couple of days a week and that sort of thing. You can have advisors on your board who give you some of that sort of horizon scanning and scenario analysis and that kind of thing. So I think that's exactly right. And particularly as you're growing an organization and mindful of cost and so on, it's a great way to have some of that expertise, but manage the cost and the overhead of all of that as well. So, and if it's going well, then hopefully if your organization grows, then you can, take more of that person's time and make it more full-time. Yeah.
I mean, have you seen any major changes in the kind of risk operating landscape or COO type landscape over the past few years?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, COVID's an obvious factor that I guess has probably made people more risk conscious, or at least it's probably an interesting thing to talk about. How many businesses did or didn't miss COVID as an event. I mean, when you're planning for risk, do you plan for black swan events as well, or do you have to say, listen, that is so big and wild that if we planned for it, we'd never get anything done?
Yeah, I think with COVID, I think probably everyone had in their scenario mapping the idea of a pandemic, but I think probably what we thought about was kind of everyone being sick, right? And that kind of, or lots and lots of people being sick. What we didn't think about was this, my goodness, like almost 2-year horizon of people not being in the office. That wasn't a scenario that I think anybody specifically mapped. And those organizations that had really, like modern tech, were on cloud-based technology, a lot of them were able to just sort of go home, open up the laptop and keep going, and, showed great resilience in that time. Other organizations had to very quickly modernize some of their tech because they were relying on, old VPN lines and all that kind of thing. And it was hugely disruptive and stressful. And, I think we're still living out some of the implications of that COVID time. But it also opened up new flexibility in terms of ways of working, in terms of locations of working. It's probably helped a lot of people in terms of their facilities costs. So I think that's something that's changed massively. And not just sort of needing fewer seats and all that kind of thing, but the flexibility that we now have with flexible offices and so on. You probably remember, if you might need to take out like a 5-year lease or a 10-year lease on a building in the past, and now you pay by the month, right? So I think that whole side of things, even since I wrote the COO book 5 years ago, that's changed massively. So facilities management is a very different beast to what it was. Technology landscape has obviously changed as well. It's so blisteringly fast now to spin up a technology instance, to use SaaS code, to use APIs, to put pieces together to make a customer experience. Shopify, Stripe, all that kind of thing. So that's changed massively in the last while. I think the people agenda has changed hugely. I think the whole cultural agenda has changed very much as well. There's a focus on mental health. There's a focus on diversity in a way that there never was before. And I think the last big thing for me that I wrote a whole chapter about in my second book was the whole area of sustainability. And I want to define sustainability. So yes, it's being eco-friendly and recycling and, thinking about your supply chain and all that kind of thing. But actually much more, it's about the sustainability of like the purpose of your business. Like, what are you in business to do? Is it a good business model? Is it helping people? Is it furthering, the cause of humanity in some way or other? Or is it actually something that's draining resources, that's ultimately causing damage and so on? So sustainability of purpose. And then, yes, how you run your supply chain, how you look after your people and all that kind of thing. So sustainability in the broadest possible sense, I think, is an issue like it never was before.
Well, you've mentioned a couple of times your book now, and obviously I introduced you as an author when we started this. Let's segue onto that and tell us how the books came about, because you've got two, haven't you? One as a how to be a CRO, one how to be a COO. What was the thinking behind it?
Well, first of all, they're the two C-suite roles that I've held. So, I wasn't going to write about something else, was I? But so the.
What was the thinking behind writing the book? Not why you chose those two particular.
I got your question. No, I was, and in fact, I may co-author some in future in other disciplines. But when I got my first COO role. Look, I was pretty experienced at that stage. I had worked in operations, I had worked in risk, I'd worked in finance, I'd had a little bit of exposure to legal. So I came with a pretty, good suite of skills. But by no means did I have all of the things that are needed to be COO, right? So, and I think I mentioned earlier, I counted 16 different things that you needed to have at least a working knowledge of to be COO. So there was, supply chain, there was PR, there was internal comms, there was external comms, there was safeguarding in the area I was in at the time. And, how I managed it was, I dug really, really deep. I was very honest in my first role about what I did and didn't have expertise in. I read the hell out of things. I'm quite a reader, I'm quite a researcher. So I researched on, all the areas that I could, and I asked people and I said, can I pick your brain? Can you talk me through this? I think this is what I need to worry about, but am I missing anything? And so just through kind of graft and grind, I was able to have the working knowledge that I needed to be successful, and obviously leaned on some very capable people in those areas as well while I came up the learning curve. But one of my frustrations, when I was researching was, where's the book? Where's the book on this? Like, why can't I go onto Amazon and buy a handbook for a chief operating officer? And it really didn't exist. So when I finished that role, I vowed I was going to write down what I had learned. So 16 disciplines, a chapter for each one. I had each chapter vetted by an expert in that field to make sure that, I hadn't missed anything and that it was good. And it seems to have proven really helpful to people. So, the book has sold really well. Almost every week, Matt, I get an email from someone going, thank you so much for your book. You've really helped me. I'm in my first role. I've just stepped up. I'm aspiring to that role, and you've really helped me. So that, and on those days, I have a smile on my face for the rest of my day, right? Because I know that it's been valuable. So that was it was born out of need, and it seems to have filled a need.
How did you find the book writing process? How long did it take you? Did you have an editor? Did you self-publish? How did it all work?
Yeah, I self-published mainly because I was sort of unknown in the world of writing or anything like that. I'm not sure like how I would have even approached a publishing house. But then I quickly realized how, and even since then, it's matured even more since then, like how enabling a space it is now. So I found the writing good and sort of a complete juxtaposition to having a busy day job. I can't write and work. I can't come home in the evening and go, right, I'll bash out a chapter now. I've always had to carve out some time to actually just devote myself to writing. But the contrast between that and a day job, when you don't have anyone else to manage, you don't have lots of meetings, it's kind of, quite solitary. I quite like actually. And I find it quite cathartic to get your thoughts down on paper and to kind of see how much you do know as well. I'm working with someone on another book at the moment, and she's saying, it's really helping with my imposter syndrome, because I'm writing all this stuff down and I'm realizing I do know, I really do know this. I do know my stuff. And, just through the sheer volume of what she's able to put down on paper. So as long as you have a structure, that's the advice I'd give to anybody who's thinking of writing something. If you can map out a table of contents, if you can think about the different content areas, if you've got enough there and you can still feel that you've got energy and things to say, then yeah, you've probably got a book. And then it's almost like, I don't want to say filling in the gaps. There's a bit more to it than that, but it's then the meat is there and you work from there. So I've enjoyed it. To answer your questions, yes, you can get really excellent editors. There's platforms, there's apps for that. You can get really great cover designers. You can get really great proofreaders. You want to make sure obviously that what you produce is really high quality and looks great and stands up to scrutiny and so on. And the Amazon KDP platform where my book is great, and allows authors to keep an awful lot more of their royalties, I'm led to believe, than if you go via a publishing house. So yeah, I love it.
How does it work on Amazon? Do they do like a Kindle version and a printed version for you? Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's right. You can, you can choose. I've gone with paperback and ebook. I haven't yet had the bravery to sit down and do an Audible, but I'm working up the energy to do that.
This has been good practice for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just used to, the way we all hate the sound of our own voices, but getting used to hearing your voice back and, sitting down to do the whatever it would be 12 hours of narration to get it done. So yeah, you can choose the different formats that you have, and that's up to you.
Well, for anyone listening, I'm sure there's many people now who want to go and either download the Kindle version or go and buy the hardback or the printed version. Where did he do it? Where can they find you? Where can they find more about you?
Books are on Amazon. Just either search for me, Jennifer Geary, or by the name of the book, How to be a Chief Operating Officer, How to be a Chief Risk Officer. My website is www.coo-author.com. I'm sure we can put some links somewhere, Matt, that people can find them.
We'll put all this stuff in the show notes for sure.
When's your book coming out, Matt? I mean, surely, I think there's enough accumulated experience and philosophy there, surely, to put it down on paper.
I've probably got 4 or 5 partially finished books. Like genuine, I don't mean like ideas of headers, like ones that I've actually started and never gotten any further. And it's either ones I've done myself or something I've done as a bit of a kind of a co-writing, ghost author type stuff. And for various reasons, it always comes down to time. I've just never quite gotten them over the edge. Yeah. But my 2023 plan, I was about to say 2022, but my 2023 plan is definitely to get at least one of them printed. I've actually, because I'm just launching a new website at the moment for our finance business, which is Funding Guru. And that's our brand that talks to borrowers. And about literally 4 years ago, I actually did write and print as a PDF version, basically everything you need to know about how to fund your business. But I'd never got around to publishing it to sell it or publish it to give it away or whatever I was going to do. But I want to have it as a resource on this new website. And literally just this morning, I dug it out to say, right, I've got to find some time this weekend to go through this, make any of the tweaks I want to do. I mean, talk about writing. I mean, I keep a reasonably regular blog, and I do write a lot of my own stuff. To be honest, I kind of write most of my own stuff, A, because I enjoy it, and B, because I always find it very difficult to get anyone else to write to my tone of voice or to write to, I guess, my level of detail on a particular topic. But what I found very good for helping me get more writing done this year, I know it sounds so simple, but it's always, the simplest things that seem to work, is I've actually physically carved out the time in my diary. And this year, I just put a recurring thing in every day of, an hour or 90 minutes of content writing. And I've got, in my notes on my computer, I've got a long list of whether it's ideas or topic headings or partially written things. And every day I've just been sitting down and picking one of those headings and turning my telephone off or sticking it in the other room because I'm always so distracted, and just finding that hour and a half to blast through it. Because if I don't do that, then there'll always be something else that takes over. So that is
totally treat it like a job, like everything else. I don't think, especially with sort of the kind of content that we create, that it's a matter of writer's block or waiting for inspiration or anything like that. No, have your structure, and if you have 10 chapters to write, it's fine on the day to go, what, my energy is telling, I feel like writing about this right now. That's fine, do that. Go where you feel like you've got something to say. But I think blog writing is great as well. If you write a 1,500 word blog, if you write 10-15 of those, you've got a book, right? Each blog post is a chapter. And I think your point clearly about carving out time and being free of distraction is something. Sometimes cues help. So I play music, right? So I find for me, Ludovico Einaudi, it just is the perfect calming backdrop. It's my signal. It's kind of like my Pavlovian signal that I need to sit down and write and that sort of thing, and just develop that habit, over and over again. And even if on a particular day you're writing a paragraph, oh, this is rubbish. Fine, we'll edit that paragraph out later, but just get started. Liz Gilbert, the writer of Eat, Pray, Love, calls it clearing your throat. Just start writing, even if the first couple of sentences are, oh God, fine, you're just clearing your throat. You're just getting started, and then just keep going. And think about the end in mind, because I promise you, the day you get your cardboard box from Amazon with the first copies of your paperback and the day you hold it in your hand is just one of the best days of your life. It's such a fantastic achievement. So you keep that in your mind and keep going.
Well, I'll say as well as a kind of a last piece of advice from me to people on it is thinking about what content you've already got to repurpose as well. And like you say, if you sit down and write a 1,500 word blog, 10 of those and you've got a book. One of the avenues I was going down for one of the books I'm trying to write is I every Sunday sit down and record a video of my weekly roundup where I'll talk about 3, 4, 5, whatever things that have happened to me in the week. And it's just me with the camera on my own, rambling away about a particular problem or a good thing, a bad thing, or whatever it may be. And I found after I'd done the first 15 or 20 of these, talking about 3 to 5 things, 15 to 20 weeks, all of a sudden there is literally 40 to 100 different topics, different concepts, and I just literally wanted to sit down and pick out the best ones, and almost take a transcription from the video, hack around the transcription, put it to a book, and all of a sudden you've got content a lot more easy than you would have ever thought it was possible.
Yeah, different people work different ways. Some people love dictation software that works for them. It does need a bit of a QA afterwards for errors and that kind of thing. But no, it can totally work to get your thoughts down that way. I personally have no problem typing. That works for me. But it very much depends on the person. And I think the other thing as well, and I want to almost correct something that I said, because, it used to be the kind of perceived wisdom that you sort of have to write 35,000 words minimum for it to be a book, right? For it to kind of stand up, to have a spine thick enough, all that kind of thing. But actually, in the age of ebooks and in the age of how to, and we learn via TikTok now, and we learn via Facebook Shorts and all that kind of thing, or sorry, YouTube Shorts. It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, you know, Matt, like if you're looking for an answer to something and the answer is in a 20-page pamphlet or it's in a 1,000-word document, that's all you need, right? And so I don't think there is even that high bar. I mean, it's obviously quality over quantity, right? You know, if you're solving a need, if you're answering a question that other people have, then that has value and that's worth putting out in the world.
100%. Well, listen, Jenny, you've been bringing plenty of value to this podcast, so thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. Obviously, you know, you've told everyone where we can find the book. Like I say, we'll put it in the show notes afterwards. Again, I don't know if I forget if you mentioned your Instagram and your LinkedIn handles and stuff, but if you didn't, you can do it now. And if you did, we're going to put that in the show notes and stuff as well. So thanks a lot again. And guys, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. As always, I am the Matt Haycox on all things social. That's TheMattHaycox. If you've been listening to this as the audio version, you can jump on over to YouTube and see my pretty face with the videos on this as well. And if you've been watching it on YouTube and you don't like looking at my pretty face, then make sure you jump over to Apple, to Spotify, to iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to your audio podcasts and listen to it there. And guys, thanks again for listening. Jenny, thanks for being here. And I look forward to seeing you all in a future episode.
Bye-bye.